I uncovered a disturbing pattern in the data flows while working as a data analyst at Omnicorp Solutions. It felt like pulling a loose thread that threatened to unravel something much larger. When I finally gathered the courage to present my findings to my team leader, Mark Adler, he visibly tensed. His usual confident demeanor flickered for just a moment. These clients, Apex Holdings, they're crucial to our bottom line then. His voice was low, strained. Let it go, he ordered, his eyes avoiding mine. Focus on the assigned projects. The air in his spacious office suddenly felt heavy, suffocating. The very next day, I received an email summoning me to Human Resources. Brenda Lewis, the HR manager, informed me curtly that the company was undergoing restructuring. My position, she explained with practiced indifference, was being eliminated due to departmental reorganization necessitated by current market conditions. Nothing personal, of course, just business. A final paycheck would be processed. Please have your personal belongings cleared from your desk by noon today, she concluded, already turning back to her computer screen. I packed a few personal items from my cubicle in a small cardboard box, numbly, without a word of protest. The usual office buzz seemed distant, muted. As I walked towards the exit, past colleagues who suddenly found their monitors intensely interesting, I felt a chilling sense of invisibility. It's unnerving how quickly you can cease to exist in a place you dedicated so much to. On my way out of the Omnicorp Tower, navigating the impersonal lobby, I made one final, critical stop at my work computer, my heart pounding against my ribs. My name is Ben Carter. I'm 29 years old. Until yesterday, I had been a data analyst at Omnicorp Solutions in River City for nearly 3 years. Most of my days were spent immersed in complex data sets, searching for the subtle anomalies and hidden patterns that others often overlooked. That's where I felt most comfortable, most competent. I've never been particularly skilled at navigating office politics or schmoozing at corporate events. Happy hours usually felt more like an obligation than a pleasure. But data analysis was different. That was my strength. My grandma always said, "Numbers don't lie, Ben, but the people using them sure can." Data tells a story, and patterns, if you know how to look, reveal truths that words often try to conceal. That's precisely why the data streams associated with Apex Holdings started to gnaw at me. It began with small discrepancies, almost negligible at first glance. Unusual timings in data transfers. License fee payments routed through a series of obscure intermediary companies I couldn't readily identify. The payment amounts seemed inflated, lacking clear justification in the corresponding service logs. These weren't random errors. They formed a distinct, repeating sequence. The routing paths consistently cycled through the same three shell corporations, entities with generic names, and no discernible online presence or verifiable physical addresses. It felt wrong, deeply wrong. Mark Adler was my direct team leader. He occupied a well-appointed office with a view, always impeccably dressed, sporting an expensive watch that glinted under the fluorescent lights. When I knocked on his door that Tuesday afternoon, a digital report loaded on my tablet, he gestured me in with a wave, his eyes fixed on his monitor. "What's up, Carter?" he asked, his tone casual, almost dismissive. I stood before his polished desk, feeling a knot tighten in my stomach. "Mr. Adler, I found something unusual in the Apex Holdings data flows." His gaze flickered briefly towards my tablet, then sharply back to my face. A flicker of something I couldn't quite name. Annoyance? Apprehension? "Unusual how?" he pressed, leaning back slightly in his high-backed chair. I activated the tablet screen, pointing to the highlighted data points and flow charts I'd prepared. These payments, I explained, trying to keep my voice steady, they seem to be funneling through shell companies. The patterns are consistent, always the same routing, always these inflated amounts linked to vague service descriptions. It looks systematic, sir. Adler took the tablet, his fingers swiping through the screens. His expression grew colder, harder, with each piece of evidence I presented. The initial mask of casual indifference slipped, replaced by a tightly controlled tension around his jaw. When he finally handed the tablet back, his hand seemed to linger on it for a beat too long, as if reluctant to let go of the damning information. These clients, Apex Holdings, they're crucial to our bottom line, Ben, he repeated, his voice dropping to a near whisper, heavy with implication. Let it go, he said again, the words now a clear, unmistakable order, leaving no room for discussion. Focus on the quarterly reports. I didn't argue, didn't push back. What good would it do? I simply nodded, feeling a chill despite the office heating. Understood, Mr. Adler. But what Adler didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that I had already meticulously backed up every relevant file, every piece of analysis to my secure personal cloud storage the night before. Something in his overly defensive tone, that flicker of nervousness in his eyes, had screamed caution. My gut instinct, honed by years of listening to Grandma's advice, told me I might desperately need those copies later. The next morning, the dreaded email from Brenda Lewis in Human Resources landed in my inbox. The subject line, important information regarding your employment. Inside her sterile office, the news was delivered with chilling efficiency. Omnicorp was restructuring. My position as a data analyst was being eliminated. Effective immediately. It wasn't personal, she assured me, just a necessary business decision. The standard severance package would be direct deposited. Please clean out your desk by noon. No one met my eyes as I carried my box through the office floor. Colleagues suddenly became intensely focused on their screens or disappeared for urgent coffee breaks. It was strange, almost surreal, how swiftly you become invisible once you're no longer part of the machine. I'd moved to River City 4 years ago after completing my master's degree in data science, hoping for a fresh start and a promising career. My parents, though alive, lived on the other side of the country, and our relationship had always been distant. Work filled that void, provided structure. My grandma, my true north, had always been my biggest supporter, my moral compass. Paying off my student loans was a constant pressure, a reminder that I needed this job, needed the stability. She always told me, trust your gut, Ben. Her voice echoed in my mind now, a stark contrast to the corporate jargon I'd just heard. Numbers may not lie, she'd often remind me, but people sure do. She had been the steady hand guiding me, especially through the rough patches, always encouraging my analytical mind, but warning me about the complexities of human intention. Omnicorp Solutions wasn't exactly my dream company, but it was a major player in the tech industry, a well-respected name with a reputation for innovation, or so I thought. It offered a solid salary and benefits, a path forward. I'd kept my head down, often working late, putting in the extra hours, trying to build a reputation as diligent, reliable, someone who got the job done accurately, even if I wasn't the most outgoing member of the team. Adler himself had hired me, praising my attention to detail during the interview process. People miss things in the data, he'd told me, leaning forward conspiratorially. Big things sometimes. I need someone on my team who doesn't just look, but sees. Those words felt bitterly ironic now. Looking back, the warning signs were there, scattered like breadcrumbs I hadn't recognized. The Apex Holdings account, I realized now, was handled differently. Access to their core data streams was more restricted than usual. Only a select few senior managers, including Adler, seemed to handle the direct client interface or approve major transactions. Any questions I'd raised previously about inconsistencies in their data or payment structures were politely deflected or met with vague, unsatisfactory answers about custom agreements or legacy systems. Once, walking past Adler's office, I'd overheard snippets of a hushed phone conversation. "No, no, absolutely no one's digging into it," he was saying, his voice tight. "It's being handled exactly as Mr. Sterling instructed." Sterling, Richard Sterling, the founder and CEO of Omnicorp Solutions. The name hung in the air for a moment before Adler quickly closed his door. At the time, I dismissed it. Office chatter. High-level dealings beyond my pay grade. I was focused on building something tangible, professional respect, a stable career path, maybe even finally achieving some real financial security. I didn't want complications, didn't want to rock the boat. Staying afloat felt more important than chasing shadows. There was a senior analyst, Sarah Chen, who worked in the risk management department on a different floor. Our paths crossed occasionally in the break room or during cross-departmental meetings. She had a reputation for being exceptionally sharp, methodical, maybe even a little intimidating to some. Quietly brilliant, always observing. Once, months ago, she'd stopped by my workstation to follow up on a data anomaly I'd flagged in a completely unrelated system audit. It wasn't even my primary project, just something I noticed. "Good catch, Ben," she'd said, her sharp eyes scanning my meticulously organized digital workspace. "Not everyone takes the time to trace inconsistencies this thoroughly." Her directness surprised me. "Just trying to do my job properly," I'd mumbled, feeling slightly self-conscious under her scrutiny. She studied me for a moment longer, a thoughtful expression on her face. "Keep doing it that way," she advised, her tone serious. Then, unexpectedly, she pulled a business card from her portfolio and handed it to me. "My direct line and personal email are on there," she said. "If you ever come across something significant, something that really doesn't add up, something that feels off, my door is always open." Confidentiality assured. I'd thanked her, surprised by the offer, and tucked the card into my wallet, filed away behind my driver's license. A lifeline offered, though I never imagined I'd actually need to use it. Until now. There was another, more ominous warning sign I'd willfully ignored. About 6 months ago, another analyst in a different data division, David Miller, had been abruptly fired. Let go without warning. The official reason given was performance issues, but the office rumor mill whispered a different story. David had apparently been asking too many pointed questions about irregularities in billing cycles for certain large enterprise accounts. Accounts that, I suspected now, might have ties to Apex or similar entities. At the time, I'd assumed he must have made a serious mistake, crossed a line he shouldn't have. It was easier to believe that than the alternative. Now, sitting in the sterile quiet of my termination, I wondered with a sickening certainty if David had seen the same patterns I had, if he'd pulled the same loose thread and paid the price. The day before I presented my findings to Adler, he had done something unusual. He'd invited me to lunch, just the two of us, at an upscale bistro near the office. It was the first time he'd ever done that. He'd spent the meal asking about my long-term career goals, whether I felt challenged and happy working at Omnicorp, flattering me by saying I had significant potential within the company. He painted a picture of advancement, of opportunity. Looking back, I see it clearly now. It wasn't genuine mentorship. It was a test. He was probing, trying to gauge my ambition, my loyalty, perhaps trying to see if I could be bought, if I could be trusted to play the game, to stay quiet if necessary. I failed his insidious test without even realizing it was being administered, simply by being honest about my focus on data integrity. The morning after the firing, I wasn't in my sparsely furnished apartment. The lease was up soon anyway, and the rent was crippling now without an income. I'd checked into the Riverside Inn, a cheap, nondescript hotel on the edge of River City, paying cash for a few nights. Privacy felt paramount. I sat on the lumpy bed, my laptop open, staring at the screen, the glow illuminating the cramped, anonymous room. Before leaving Omnicorp for the last time, bypassing the standard log-off procedures, I had ensured the final, complete data sets related to Apex Holdings were securely synced to my encrypted personal cloud drive. It wasn't exactly by the book, potentially a breach of my employment agreement, but my gut screamed that something much bigger, much dirtier, was unfolding. This wasn't just sloppy accounting. It felt deliberate, predatory. I opened a new analysis file, pulling together all the suspicious data flows I'd flagged over the past months. Mapping it out visually, away from the constraints and watchful eyes of the Omnicorp network, the picture became horrifyingly clear. Over the last year alone, easily several $1 million, maybe more, had been systematically siphoned through those opaque shell companies disguised as legitimate license fees and service charges. I hadn't grasped the full scale of it while buried in day-to-day tasks at the office, but here, laid out in stark charts and timelines, the pattern wasn't just suspicious. It was undeniable evidence of large-scale fraud. Someone, likely multiple someones high up within Omnicorp, was using the company's infrastructure to launder money for Apex Holdings. And Mark Adler, my seemingly affable team leader, knew all about it. He wasn't just complicit. He was actively suppressing discovery. My phone buzzed on the cheap bedside table, startling me. A text message from Chloe Davis, another analyst from my old team at Omnicorp. "Hey Ben, heard what happened?" The message read. "Totally blindsided. So unfair they cut you without any warning. Let me know if you need anything. Drinks later, maybe to vent?" Her kindness felt like a small, flickering candle in the darkness, but I couldn't bring myself to respond. How could I explain the real reason I was fired? What could I possibly say? And more importantly, in this web of deceit, who could I really trust anymore? My hand automatically went to my wallet on the nightstand. I pulled out Sarah Chin's business card, the crisp white stock feeling substantial between my fingers. Her direct line and personal email address were printed beneath her title, Senior Analyst, Risk Management. My thumb hovered over the call button on my phone's screen. Contacting her felt like stepping off a cliff. What would this even accomplish? I was already fired, an outsider now. Taking on a giant corporation like Omnicorp, with its army of lawyers and deep connections, seemed like career suicide. It would be expensive, utterly draining, and I'd inevitably be branded a disgruntled ex-employee, a troublemaker. Maybe the smart thing, the safe thing, was to just let it go, as Adler had ordered. Cut my losses, find another job somewhere far away from River City, and try to forget everything I'd seen, everything I suspected. The cheap hotel room suddenly felt suffocatingly small, the walls closing in. I needed air, needed space to think. I grabbed my keys and drove aimlessly for a while, the familiar streets of River City blurring past my window. Eventually, I found myself pulling into the parking lot of Willow Creek Park, a place my grandma used to take me when I visited her years ago, before she moved into the nursing home. I sat on a worn wooden bench near the creek, watching joggers stride past and families playing with their dogs under the afternoon sun. The normalcy of it felt jarring, a world away from the corporate corruption I'd stumbled upon. Trust your gut, Ben. I could almost hear Grandma's firm, steady voice cutting through the haze of my fear and indecision. Her unwavering belief in doing the right thing, regardless of the cost. What was my gut telling me now? It screamed that what was happening at Omnicorp wasn't just unethical. It was criminal. That powerful people like Sterling and Adler were breaking the law, likely hurting countless unseen others in the process, all for profit and power. That Adler had made his choice, aligning himself with corruption, and it was undeniably the wrong side. And that left me with a choice I couldn't avoid any longer. Walk away and live with the knowledge of what I knew, or stand up and fight, no matter the consequences. When I returned to the suffocating quiet of the Riverside Inn, the churning anxiety had been replaced by a cold, hard resolve. Fear was still present, a knot in my stomach, but determination now overlaid it. I spent the next few hours meticulously organizing the data, not printing physical pages, too risky. Instead, I created encrypted, password-protected files on multiple thumb drives, documenting everything chronologically. I added detailed annotations, cross-referencing suspicious transactions, highlighting the connections to Apex Holdings and the shell corporations. I wrote a clear, concise summary outlining the methodology of the fraud as I understood it, naming Adler's directive to drop the investigation, and detailing the timing of my subsequent dismissal. Finally, I composed a short, carefully worded email to Sarah Chen's personal address, the one from her business card. Subject: Confidential inquiry urgent. Body: Sarah, it's Ben Carter. We spoke briefly a few months ago. I've encountered some highly sensitive information regarding Apex Holdings that requires immediate attention from risk management. It directly pertains to my recent termination. Can we meet privately tomorrow to discuss? Utmost discretion is required. I hit send before I could second guess myself. Her reply arrived surprisingly quickly, just 20 minutes later. Ben, understood. There's a quiet coffee shop, the Daily Grind on Elm Street downtown. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Back booth. Come alone. That night, cocooned in the anonymity of the cheap hotel, knowing I had finally taken a concrete step, I slept more soundly than I had in weeks. The first move had been made. There was no turning back now. The Daily Grind was dimly lit and smelled of burnt coffee and stale pastries, perfect for an inconspicuous meeting. Sarah Chen was already seated in the back booth as promised, nursing a cup of tea, her expression calm but watchful. She looked up as I approached, her gaze sharp and analytical. Ben, she acknowledged quietly, gesturing to the seat opposite her. I slid into the worn vinyl booth, placing my encrypted thumb drive unobtrusively on the table between us. Thanks for meeting me, Sarah, I began, keeping my voice low. As you know, I'm no longer with Omnicorp. Fired yesterday for restructuring. Her eyes held mine. I heard. I suspected it wasn't the full story. It wasn't, I confirmed. This, I tapped the thumb drive, is why I believe I was terminated. It concerns Apex Holdings and irregularities in their data flows and payments. Millions of dollars moving through shell companies. She didn't reach for the drive immediately. Instead, she leaned forward slightly. Tell me what you found first, Ben. In your own words. I explained everything, the data patterns, the inflated license fees, the routing through untraceable entities, Adler's explicit order to let it go, and the sudden dismissal the very next day, citing fabricated reasons. I described the overheard conversation mentioning Mr. Sterling. Sarah listened intently, her expression unreadable, asking clarifying questions occasionally, but mostly letting me speak. When I finished, the silence hung heavy for a moment. She finally picked up the thumb drive. "You made copies of internal Omnicorp data," she stated, her voice neutral. It wasn't an accusation, just a fact. "Yes," I admitted. "I backed it up before they locked me out. I felt I had no choice." "That's a violation of company policy, Ben. Potentially illegal depending on the specifics of your employment agreement." "I know," I said, meeting her steady gaze. "But what I found is far more illegal. This goes way beyond policy violations." She studied me for a long moment, assessing, weighing. "What do you want to achieve with this, Ben? What's your goal?" The question caught me slightly off guard. "Goal? I. I don't have one. Not really. Revenge? No, I couldn't walk away. I couldn't know this was happening and do nothing. It felt fundamentally wrong." A small sigh escaped her lips. She slipped the thumb drive into her bag. "All right, I'll look into this immediately. This aligns with some inconsistencies my department has flagged internally but couldn't substantiate. But I can't make any promises about the outcome," she cautioned, her eyes serious. "And you need to understand, Ben, bringing this forward, even internally through proper channels like mine, could have serious repercussions for you. Omnicorp is powerful. Sterling is ruthless." I nodded slowly, the knot returning to my stomach. "I understand the risks." "Do you?" She pressed gently. "They have deep pockets and an army of lawyers. If you're right about the scale of this, people, powerful people, could lose everything. Their careers, their freedom. They won't hesitate to fight back, and they'll fight dirty to protect themselves." "They already fired me to shut me up," I said, a bitter edge to my voice. "What more can they really do?" I got my answer 3 days later, delivered by certified mail to the Riverside Inn. A crisp, formal letter from Vance and Associates, the high-powered law firm Omnicorp apparently kept on retainer. It wasn't from Olivia Vance, the whistleblower attorney I hadn't yet contacted. This was the opposition. The letter accused me, in no uncertain terms, of theft of proprietary company data, breach of my confidentiality agreement, and potential corporate defamation. It demanded the immediate return of all Omnicorp property, including any digital copies of data, and included a pre-written statement for me to sign, retracting any unfounded allegations I might have made regarding financial improprieties at the company. The final paragraph contained a thinly veiled threat. Failure to comply immediately would force Omnicorp to pursue all available legal remedies to the fullest extent of the law to protect its interests and reputation. My blood ran cold as I read it. They weren't just trying to silence me, they were trying to bury me. That same afternoon, my burner phone, purchased along with the thumb drives, rang. An unknown number. My heart hammered against my ribs. Hesitantly, I answered. "Ben?" The voice was instantly recognizable, smooth yet strained. "Mark Adler." "It's Adler. We need to talk." "Urgently." I gripped the cheap phone, trying to keep my voice level, betraying none of the fear churning inside me. "Mr. Adler, I don't think contacting me directly is appropriate, especially after receiving that letter from your lawyers." A sigh on the other end. "Look, Ben, maybe things got a little overheated." His tone shifted, attempting conciliation. I know you're upset about losing your job, understandably, but escalating this, making baseless accusations, this isn't the way. It helps no one. He paused, letting the silence hang. If you just drop this now, return the data you took, we can make this right. We can work something out. Maybe even find a place for you back on the team, a different role perhaps? The offer hung in the air, slick and poisonous. A cold fury began to replace the fear. What team would that be, Adler? I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm I couldn't contain. The team that looks the other way while Apex Holdings launders millions through Omnicorp? The team that fires people for doing their jobs? Silence crackled on the line. When he spoke again, the false congeniality was gone, replaced by ice. You have absolutely no idea what you're talking about, Carter, or who you're messing with. There was a hint of genuine fear in his own voice now, quickly masked by anger. These people. He stopped himself abruptly, as if realizing he'd said too much. Just meet me. Coffee 15 minutes. Let's sort this out like adults. No thanks, Adler. I think we're done talking. You're making a monumental mistake, Carter, he hissed, the threat no longer veiled. A mistake you will regret. The line went dead. After hanging up, my hands shaking, I knew I couldn't handle this alone. I needed professional help. I searched online for attorneys specializing in corporate whistleblower cases in the region. Olivia Vance's name surfaced, associated with Vance and Associates, ironically, the same firm name, but clearly a different practice focused on employees, not corporations. Her profile highlighted successful cases against large companies. The consultation fee was steep, nearly a week's pay from my old Omnicorp salary, money I could barely afford now, but the threatening letter and Adler's call made it non-negotiable. I needed to understand my legal standing, my risks, my options. Ms. Vance's office was professional, but understated, a stark contrast to Omnicorp's lavish headquarters. Olivia Vance herself was sharp, focused, listening intently without interruption as I laid out the entire story, the data, the shell companies, Apex Holdings, Adler's warning, the overheard mention of Sterling, the firing, the backup data, Sarah Chin's involvement, the threatening letter, Adler's call. You've placed yourself in a legally precarious position, Mr. Carter, she stated calmly when I finished, her gaze direct. Taking proprietary data, even with good intentions, opens you up to civil and potentially criminal liability. My stomach sank. But, she continued, leaning forward slightly, if your allegations of fraud and money laundering are accurate, and if we can demonstrate that your termination was direct retaliation for discovering and attempting to report this illegal activity, then you likely qualify for significant whistleblower protections under state and federal law. The challenge, she cautioned, tapping her pen on the legal pad, is definitively proving that retaliation. They've conveniently labeled your dismissal as restructuring. We need to pierce that corporate veil, establish the direct causal link between your discovery and your firing. So what are you saying? I asked, frustration mounting. Should I just back down? Sign their retraction? Let Sterling and Adler get away with it? She held up a hand. I didn't say back down. I said it's precarious, and we need to be strategic. Her eyes were resolute. I'm saying it will be a fight. Omnicorp will use every resource to discredit you. But I also believe truth has a way of coming out, especially when the evidence is digital. We need more, she concluded. More concrete evidence directly linking Adler's actions, and ideally Sterling's, to your termination. Your testimony is crucial. Sarah Chin's potential cooperation is helpful, but something more tangible would significantly strengthen our position before we approach the authorities. Leaving Olivia Vance's office, I felt a strange mix of dread and empowerment. The risks were terrifyingly real, but at least now I had a potential path forward, a knowledgeable ally. Walking towards the bus stop, a prickling sensation ran down my spine. A black sedan, nondescript but somehow menacing, was parked halfway down the block. It had been behind my taxi when I arrived at the law office. Now it was just sitting there, engine idling. Was it just a coincidence? River City paranoia setting in? Or was Adler's warning about these people more than just bluster? Had I truly stumbled into something far bigger, far more dangerous than a simple white-collar crime? The sedan pulled away slowly as I reached the corner, disappearing into traffic. It left me with a chilling unease that lingered long after it was gone. That night, sleep was impossible. The cheap hotel room felt like a cage. Adler's veiled threat echoed in my mind. These people. Who exactly was he afraid of? Apex Holdings? Or was it Sterling, the powerful CEO pulling the strings from the top? How deep did this rock go? Unable to rest, I pulled out my laptop again, pushing aside the legal worries for a moment and focusing back on the data, the source of this mess. I started digging deeper into Apex Holdings, trying to find anything publicly available. They presented themselves as a private equity firm, diversified across tech investments, real estate, and obscure emerging markets. Their website was glossy and professional, but frustratingly vague about their actual portfolio or leadership structure beyond a generic board listing. Their CEO wasn't prominently featured, almost a ghost. Then, buried deep in archived news feeds, I found it. A small article from the City Chronicle dated 3 years ago, long before I started at Omnicorp. Apex Holdings had been the subject of a preliminary investigation by the state's Financial Crimes Unit, the FCU, concerning potential securities fraud linked to offshore investments. But the investigation had been abruptly closed. No charges filed, no public explanation given. Intrigued, I dug further, cross-referencing names and dates. I found another brief mention in a financial blog's archives. The lead FCU investigator on the Apex case had taken an unexpected early retirement shortly after the investigation was shelved. Coincidence? Or pattern? My analyst brain screamed pattern. A sudden, sharp knock on my hotel room door shattered the late-night silence, making me jump nearly out of my skin. It was close to midnight. My heart leaped into my throat. Adler? Omnicorp Security? Worse? I crept towards the door, my breath held tight, and peered cautiously through the peephole. My eyes widened in disbelief. David Miller stood in the dimly lit hallway, looking gaunt, haunted, and profoundly nervous. The analyst fired 6 months ago for asking too many questions. He glanced furtively down the corridor before looking back at the door. What was he doing here? How did he even find me? Hesitantly, I unlocked and opened the door just a crack. David? I whispered. Ben Carter? He asked, his voice raspy. Can I come in? Quickly. It's not safe out here. He practically slipped inside as I opened the door wider, immediately locking and bolting it behind him. He leaned against the door, breathing heavily, eyes darting around the room. Were you followed? I asked, the black sedan flashing in my mind. I think so, he panted. Had to ditch my car a few blocks away and circle back on foot. How did you find me? Sarah, he said simply. She contacted me after you met with her. Said you had the Apex data. Said you were serious. He pushed himself away from the door and reached into his worn jacket pocket, pulling out a small, standard USB flash drive. His hand was trembling slightly as he held it out to me. "They've got Sarah," he said, his voice choked with urgency and fear. Omnicorp security detained her this evening when she tried to access restricted server logs flagged by your data. They took her phone, her laptop. She's in deep trouble, Ben. My blood turned to ice. Sarah taken because of me? What's on this? I asked, taking the drive, the plastic feeling cold against my skin. Insurance, David said, his eyes burning with a desperate intensity. My insurance. I've been holding on to it since they fired me. It's an audio recording. Adler giving instructions directly from Sterling about how to handle the Apex account transfers, how to bury the discrepancies, how to manage anyone who gets too close. He swallowed hard. I recorded it during a meeting I wasn't supposed to be in. It's everything. Proof it goes right to the top. You need to get this to the FBI, he urged, grabbing my arm. Not the state of CU Sterling has influence there. That's why the first Apex probe died. The Fed's Financial Crimes Unit. Agent Miller. Sarah mentioned that name, said she had a contact if things went bad. Find Agent Miller. He released my arm, already backing towards the door. I can't stay. They might know Sarah contacted me. This is all I can do. He paused at the door, his face etched with exhaustion and grim determination. Good luck, Ben. Nail those bastards. And then he was gone, melting back into the shadowed hallway, leaving me alone in a cheap hotel room with a flash drive clutched in my hand, a potential key to justice, or a trigger for something far worse. Staring at the small piece of plastic, I thought of Sarah, detained, vulnerable. I thought of David living in fear for 6 months. I thought of Adler's threats, Sterling's invisible power, the black sedan. The choice was no longer mine alone. Taking a deep breath, the tremor in my own hands matching David's, I pulled out my phone again. This time, I didn't hesitate. I found the main number for the regional FBI field office and asked to be connected to the Financial Crimes Unit, specifically Agent Miller, citing an urgent matter regarding Omnicorp Solutions and Apex Holdings. I gave my name, Ben Carter. No anonymity. No hiding. The time for that was over. The first wave of federal indictments came down with the force of a thunderclap exactly 1 week after my call to Agent Miller and the subsequent debriefing where I provided the Apex data and David's crucial audio recording. The FCU moved swiftly, decisively. Early morning raids, executed simultaneously, hit the gleaming Omnicorp headquarters, the opulent River City homes of Richard Sterling and Mark Adler, the CFO's residence, and the offices of 2 other senior executives implicated by the combined evidence. The City Chronicle's front page screened the headline, Local Tech Giant Omnicorp Raided. CO Sterling, top execs arrested in massive fraud probe linked to Apex Holdings. News channels aired footage of grim-faced agents carrying boxes of files out of the Omnicorp tower, juxtaposed with images of Richard Sterling, stone-faced and handcuffed, being led into a black government vehicle. Adler, looking pale and shaken, followed soon after. Sterling, Adler, the CFO, and 2 VPs were charged with a staggering list of federal offenses. Conspiracy to commit wire fraud, multiple counts of money laundering, securities fraud, and obstruction of justice. The CEO of Apex Holdings vanished, reportedly fleeing the country hours before the raids began. Omnicorp's stock plummeted into freefall on the news. Within days, the company, stripped of its leadership and facing mountains of legal battles and regulatory fines, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Its viable assets would eventually be carved up and sold off to competitors, its once proud name irrevocably tarnished. Mark Adler, facing decades in prison, quickly agreed to cooperate with prosecutors, providing testimony against Sterling in exchange for significantly reduced charges. News reports indicated Sarah Chen had been quickly released following the FBI's intervention and was providing critical cooperation to the investigation, her own internal findings corroborating the data I and David had supplied. The morning the indictments were officially unsealed, shaking the River City business community to its core, I received an unexpected email. It was a formal job offer from Sterling Advisory Group, the reputable financial consulting firm I had tentatively interviewed with weeks before my termination, back when I was just beginning to feel uneasy at Omnicorp. They had apparently followed the news closely, and, through industry-backed channels, and perhaps a discreet word from Olivia Vance, learned about my role in uncovering the Omnicorp scandal. The offer wasn't just for a data analyst position. It was for a senior role focusing on forensic data analysis and risk assessment, with a salary significantly higher than I'd ever made at Omnicorp. Attached was a personal note from the CEO. Mr. Carter, integrity and courage are qualities we value highly at Sterling Advisory. We believe your skills would be a tremendous asset to our team. We need more people willing to see the patterns others miss and act on them. My breath caught in my throat. It felt like validation, a light at the end of a very dark tunnel. I accepted the offer without hesitation. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place about a month later. A thick envelope arrived, not at the Riverside Inn. I had moved into a small, temporary apartment, but forwarded from my old address. It was from the U.S. Department of Justice, specifically the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit Whistleblower Rewards Program. The letter officially stated that because the information and evidence I provided corroborated by subsequent witnesses like Sarah Chen and Mark Adler had led directly to successful criminal indictments and was anticipated to lead to substantial asset forfeiture and financial penalties against the involved parties, I was eligible for a whistleblower award. The estimated reward percentage was clearly stated. A significant portion of the total funds recovered by the government from the Omnicorp holding scheme. When I calculated the potential amount based on the fraud figures mentioned in the indictment documents, my eyes widened in disbelief. It was a life-altering sum. I wouldn't have to worry about paying off student loans or rent or much else for a very, very long time. It felt surreal, almost undeserved, but Olivia Vance assured me it was standard procedure, designed to incentivize exactly the kind of difficult choice I had made. That evening, I drove out to the quiet cemetery where my grandma was buried. I placed a small bouquet of her favorite flowers, daisies, by the simple headstone. The air was cool, peaceful. "You were right, Grandma," I whispered, tracing the engraved letters of her name. About trusting my gut, about people sometimes using numbers to lie. A faint smile touched my lips. It was difficult, but I think I did the right thing. I could almost hear her gentle, knowing chuckle in the rustling leaves of the nearby oak tree. "Of course you did, Ben. Of course." 6 months after the FBI raids shattered Omnicorp's facade, I sat in a bright, modern coffee shop downtown, not far from the Sterling Advisory Group offices. Sunlight streamed through the large windows as I reviewed complex data models for a new client, the work challenging, and, for the first time in a long while, deeply satisfying. My phone buzzed softly on the table. A news alert notification. Former Omnicorp CEO Richard Sterling pleads guilty in federal fraud case. He had finally accepted a plea deal, avoiding a lengthy trial. The article mentioned a likely sentence of 7 to 10 years in federal prison. The company bearing his name was officially no more. A cautionary tale whispered in business ethics classes. I closed the alert, a strange sense of closure washing over me, and returned my focus to the intricate patterns on my laptop screen. The scandal itself had mostly faded from the daily headlines, replaced by newer crises and political dramas. But its ripples continued to spread. Stricter internal compliance protocols mandated across the tech industry in River City, renewed scrutiny of private equity dealings, a heightened awareness of the importance of data integrity. Mark Adler had received a suspended sentence and several years of probation thanks to his extensive cooperation against Sterling. I'd heard through the grapevine that he'd quietly moved out of state, supposedly working at his brother-in-law's small insurance agency somewhere in the Midwest, far from the tech world he once inhabited. He tried contacting me once via email a few months back. The subject line simply Ben. The preview text started with, "I hope someday you can understand." I deleted it without opening, without reading further. There was nothing left to say. Sarah Chen had landed firmly on her feet, quickly recruited by a prestigious national regulatory compliance consulting firm where her sharp intellect and first-hand experience with corporate malfeasance were highly valued. We met occasionally for coffee, a quiet understanding passing between us, bound by the shared crucible of the Omnicorp affair. But the intensity of the experience kept us from becoming easy friends. An unspoken boundary remained. David Miller, I learned indirectly, had moved to Austin. He'd taken a job with a cybersecurity startup, completely leaving the world of corporate data analysis behind, seeking a fresh start away from the ghosts of Omnicorp. I hoped he'd found peace. And me? I was doing well. Genuinely well. The new job at Sterling Advisory Group was stimulating, demanding, and rewarding in ways Omnicorp never was. My new boss, a senior partner who valued directness and thoroughness, explicitly praised my attention to detail, my healthy skepticism, and my unwillingness to simply accept data at face value without understanding its context and origin. The whistleblower reward money sat safely invested, mostly untouched. I'd used a small portion as a down payment on a modest house just outside River City, a place with a small garden and, crucially, a clear view overlooking Willow Creek Park, a place Grandma would have loved. Old habits died hard, though. I still found myself checking my rearview mirror a little too often when driving alone. I still maintained meticulous encrypted backups of all important personal and professional documents on multiple offline drives. I still trusted verifiable patterns in data far more than eloquent promises from people. But the gnawing anxiety was gone. I slept soundly at night. The crushing weight of silence lifted. As I paid for my coffee that afternoon, packing my laptop into my bag, a young man hesitantly approached my table. He looked to be in his early 20s, radiating a nervous energy, clutching a sleek company-issued tablet. "Excuse me," he said, his voice uncertain. "Are you Ben Carter?" I nodded cautiously, a flicker of the old wariness surfacing before I suppressed it. "Yes, I am." "Great. I'm Kevin. Kevin Young," he introduced himself, shifting his weight. "I just started at Sterling Advisory Group this week in the Junior Analyst program. My new employer. My orientation advisor mentioned I should try to talk to you about the firm's data integrity protocols. Said you were the best person to explain, well, why they really matter so much here." I studied him for a moment, bright-eyed, eager, earnest, carrying that familiar mix of ambition and slight trepidation. He reminded me sharply of myself, not so long ago, before Omnicorp, before Apex, before everything changed. A faint smile touched my lips. Have a seat, Kevin, I said, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. He quickly sat down, pulling out a stylus, ready to take notes on his tablet. Let me tell you a story, I began, leaning forward slightly. It's about patterns in data, and why noticing them, truly seeing them, is probably the most important part of the job we do. He looked up, intrigued, pen poised. I started at the beginning, not with technical details, but with the subtle feeling that something was wrong. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do isn't shouting the loudest or making the most noise. Sometimes it's simply refusing to look away when everyone else finds it easier, safer, to pretend they don't see anything at all.